Behind every great sitcom is a mountain of bizarre secrets, and Benson is no exception. This political comedy ran for 7 seasons and earned a devoted fan base. But what happened behind the cameras was just as wild as anything happening inside the governor's mansion. We've got shocking casting disasters, dark backstories nobody talks about, a real-life rescue that nobody expected, and one jaw-dropping bonus at the end that almost nobody has ever heard about. So speed up with me, because the list starts now. Number 1. Jerry Seinfeld's brutal firing. Before Jerry Seinfeld became television's most famous comedian, he was fired from a sitcom in the most humiliating way possible. In 1980, a young and relatively unknown Seinfeld landed a recurring role on Benson as Frankie, a delivery boy who fancied himself a stand-up comic. The character wasn't too far from Seinfeld's real personality at the time, an aspiring comedian trying to work his material on anyone who would listen, including the entire governor's mansion staff. He appeared in just 3 episodes during the show's 2nd season, but creative tensions between Seinfeld and the producers escalated quickly. The disagreements were about how Frankie should be played, and the show's team didn't handle the split professionally. Rather than calling Seinfeld or his agent, the Benson production simply stopped writing scripts for his character. When he showed up to what he believed was a routine table read, there was no script waiting for him. That's when he found out he was fired. In a 2006 interview, Seinfeld admitted he was angry, not just about the firing, but about the cowardly way it was handled. That experience reportedly pushed him to focus harder on stand-up, where he had full creative control. Without this humiliation on the Benson set, the world might never have gotten the show that made his name. Number 2. The governor's wife was eaten by horses. This is one of the darkest throwaway jokes ever written into a family-friendly sitcom. In the very first episode of Benson, Governor Gatling explains why he's raising his daughter alone. His wife Olivia, we're told, was on her way to a costume party dressed as the Sugar Plum Fairy from the Nutcracker. Being dedicated to authenticity, she had sewn her entire costume out of real sugar cubes. She decided to take a shortcut through a pasture. The horses in the field noticed the sugar, and the rest, as they say, is history, or rather, tragedy. The horses ate the costume, and Olivia along with it. What makes this even stranger is that the writers played it completely straight as a throwaway line, not a punchline. The absurdity was intentional. It connected Benson to its parent series, Soap, which thrived on ridiculous, over-the-top storylines. But for what would become a generally wholesome sitcom, this remains one of the most bizarre character backstories in television history. If you are enjoying this, take 2 seconds and leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. That support really motivates my work and helps a lot with bringing more content. Number 3. 3 secret endings were filmed. The cliffhanger that left Benson fans without closure for decades wasn't an accident, but it also wasn't the only option. The production team secretly filmed 4 completely different versions of the series finale. In the final season, the show's central conflict had become Benson running against his old boss, Governor Gatling, for the state's top office. Director Gary Brown, who helmed the finale and over 20 other episodes, later revealed that the team shot 4 distinct endings. One showed Benson winning, another had Governor Gatling holding on to his position, a third featured a tie between the 2 candidates, which would have set up a chaotic 8th season. The 4th was the notorious freeze-frame cliffhanger that actually aired on April 19, 1986. Cutting off just as the announcer was about to reveal the winner. The plan was to pick the best version during the summer break. According to Brown, whichever way the election went, the long-term Season 8 arc would eventually have Benson becoming governor regardless. But the show's sudden cancellation made that decision permanent. All 4 alternate endings remain locked away, unseen, as lost television history. Number 4. Robert Guillaume preferred Soap's Benson. Robert Guillaume brought Benson Dubois to life for 7 seasons, but he openly admitted that he preferred playing the character on Soap, the show that started it all. On Soap, which ran from 1977 to 1981, Benson was sharper, grumpier, and far more confrontational. Guillaume described that version as having an off-color sense of humor and a genuine willingness to be outspoken about the absurdity around him. He wasn't diplomatic, he was blunt, and it worked brilliantly. But when producer Susan Harris created the spin-off, she deliberately softened the character's edges. The new Benson was more affable and restrained. Still witty, but considerably less challenging. Harris understood what mainstream network audiences would accept from a black lead character in the early 1980s, and she made the calculation accordingly. Guillaume recognized the business logic, but he felt something essential had been lost. The original Benson was a more complex and authentic portrait, and Guillaume believed that complexity made the character far more interesting to actually perform. The softened version won him an Emmy, but according to Guillaume, the raw, grouchier version on soap was the real Benson. Number 5. Two future Star Trek legends met on this show. Long before they boldly went where no one had gone before, two of Benson's main cast members were quietly building a friendship that would carry them into science fiction history. Ethan Phillips, who played the high-strung press secretary Pete Downey, and René Auberjonois, who portrayed the pompous chief of staff Clayton Endicott III, had no idea their time in a fictional governor's mansion was preparing them for outer space. Phillips joined the show in its second season, playing Pete as a frantic public relations man caught between political crises and his own chaotic romantic life. Auberjonois had already established Endicott as one of the show's most memorable characters, snobbish, hypochondriac, and perpetually outmaneuvered by Benson. Their comedic chemistry was unmistakable. After Benson ended, both actors remained close, and both eventually landed iconic roles in separate Star Trek series during the 1990s. Phillips became Neelix, the warm and relentlessly cheerful alien cook on Voyager. Auberjonois became Odo, the shape-shifting security chief on Deep Space Nine. Both characters, a cook and a lawman, served their respective ships and stations in supporting roles not entirely different from what they'd done at the governor's mansion. Number 6. Krauss had a supernatural running gag. One of Benson's most persistently funny mysteries involved what can only be described as a psychic ability. Whenever Benson muttered a sarcastic insult about Gretchen Krauss, the proud, no-nonsense German cook, under his breath, assuming she was safely out of earshot, her voice would immediately boom from somewhere off stage. I heard that. The timing was always perfect, and the show never once bothered to explain how she could possibly hear him from down the hall, through closed doors, or from an entirely different wing of the mansion. Inga Swenson's delivery of the line became iconic, stretched out, dramatically pronounced, equal parts threatening and playful. What made the gag even funnier was that none of the other characters ever acknowledged how bizarre this was. Nobody thought it was strange that Krauss seemed to have sonic superpowers tuned specifically to detect Benson's insults. The show treated her impossible hearing as a completely ordinary quirk of mansion life. It never got a punchline. It never got an explanation. It just kept happening, season after season, and somehow that made it funnier every single time. Number 7. A real Pasadena house played the mansion. The governor's mansion in Benson may have existed in a fictional, deliberately unnamed state, but the building used for exterior shots was very real. Located at 1365 South Oakland Avenue in Pasadena, California, the house served as the visual stand-in for the seat of state government throughout all 7 seasons. Its stately facade and well-maintained grounds gave the show exactly the kind of dignified presence you'd expect from a governor's official residence. The choice of a Southern California location made practical sense. It kept production costs manageable without requiring long-distance travel for exterior shots. What makes this especially interesting today is that the house looks almost exactly the same as it did during the show's original run from 1979 to 1986. Dedicated fans can still drive to South Oakland Avenue and immediately recognize the building from the opening credits. Unlike many filming locations that have been demolished or heavily renovated over the decades, this one has held its character remarkably well, making it a quiet pilgrimage site for television history enthusiasts who want to stand where the mansion once stood. Number 8. The horse death was borrowed from another show. That unforgettable story about the governor's wife being eaten by horses didn't come entirely from the Benson writer's own imaginations. It was a clever adaptation of one of the most beloved absurd deaths in television comedy history, from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. In that classic episode, a children's TV character named Chuckles the Clown met his end when he was trampled by an elephant during a parade. The dark irony was that Chuckles had been dressed as a peanut at the time, and elephants, as everyone knows, love peanuts. The episode became legendary for balancing genuine tragedy with irresistible absurdity. The Benson writers took that same structure. A person in an elaborate costume, killed by animals naturally attracted to what the costume represented, and rebuilt it for their own show. A clown dressed as a peanut became a governor's wife dressed in sugar cubes. An elephant became a field full of horses. The comedic bones were identical. This kind of creative borrowing and adaptation was extremely common in television writing during the late 1970s and 80s, when successful comedic frameworks moved between shows and audiences without anyone making much of a fuss about it. Before we keep going, subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling me which movie or show you want me to cover next with strange behind-the-scenes facts. I read every single one. Number 9. Ted Danson had a secret cameo. 1 year before Ted Danson became television's most famous bartender on Cheers, he made a memorable guest appearance on Benson. In the 1981 episode titled Marcy's Wedding, Danson played Dan, a charming television producer who swept the governor's secretary Marcy Hill off her feet and eventually led her to the altar. It was a role that let him flex exactly the kind of easy charm and leading man charisma that would define Sam Malone when Cheers premiered later that same year. The episode also served as a proper farewell for the character, writing Marcy out of the series as she left the mansion to start a new life. During the wedding, Benson himself was asked to give Marcy away, a moment that highlighted how genuinely close the staff had become over the show's early seasons. What makes this appearance particularly notable in retrospect is the timing. Danson demonstrated on Benson that he could play a sophisticated professional with natural wit and warmth, and those exact qualities made him the perfect fit for Cheers just months later. His Benson appearance reads today like an audition he didn't know he was giving. Number 10. The show accidentally predicted the internet. In what may be one of television's most remarkable accidental prophecies, Benson became one of the first network series to depict internet-like technology in actual use, more than a decade before most Americans had ever heard of the World Wide Web. A sixth season episode titled Scenario, which aired on February 22, 1985, featured characters communicating and sharing information using what was essentially an early form of networked computing. At the time, the internet existed primarily as a research tool used by universities, government agencies, and tech companies, completely invisible to the general TV-watching public. What makes this even more striking is that Benson was a political sitcom, not a science fiction series. Nobody would have expected it to stumble into technological prophecy. Yet the episode treated this emerging technology as a practical government work tool, not a fantasy, not a gimmick, but a logical next step for how offices would eventually operate. That grounded, realistic approach to depicting something so far ahead of its time suggests that someone in the writer's room had a genuinely unusual understanding of where computing was headed. Number 11. The show's state was deliberately mysterious. For 7 seasons and over 150 episodes, Benson never once told viewers which state Governor Gatling actually governed. The writers kept the location deliberately vague, referring only to the state or the capital without ever giving a concrete answer. The result was one of television's most enduring geographical mysteries. Fans became amateur detectives. Some noticed that Benson's office contained a map showing New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, pointing to the Northeast. Others found a picture of the Chesapeake Bay region in the same office, which suggested somewhere further south. One episode had characters mention traveling 1,900 miles to reach the White House, which would place the state somewhere out west, possibly Montana, Idaho, Utah, or Arizona. Another episode referenced a school 300 miles away, but without knowing whether it was in-state or not, that clue led nowhere. A few fans argued for Illinois, based on a Springfield reference, but since nearly every state has a city called Springfield, that theory went nowhere fast. The Connecticut theory gained traction because Soap, Benson's parent show, was set there, but the writers never confirmed it. The deliberate ambiguity was strategic. Any viewer in any state could imagine Benson was working for their government, making the show universally relatable without stepping on any real political toes. Number 12. Multiple characters were mysteriously recast. The role of Governor Gatling's chief of staff went through one of the most unusual casting journeys in sitcom history. 3 different actors and 2 completely different character concepts before the show found what it was actually looking for. It started in the pilot, where actor David Hedison played the chief of staff as a relatively straightforward political aide. When the show moved into regular production, the producers recast the role with Louis J. Stadlin, who played a character named John Taylor throughout the entire first season. Taylor was competent, but unremarkable. He helped the governor manage his daily obligations without ever generating any memorable comedic energy. At the end of season 1, the producers made a bold decision: don't just recast the role again, completely reinvent it. They wrote John Taylor out with a storyline where he quits his job to run for political office and pointedly refuses an endorsement from Governor Gatling on his way out the door. When season 2 began, René Auberjonois stepped in as Clayton Endicott III, a pompous, hypochondriac aristocrat who immediately became one of the show's best comedic assets. The contrast between his insufferable pretension and Benson's no-nonsense practicality was exactly what the show had been missing. Number 13, the show had presidential aspirations. The writers of Benson had far bigger plans for their title character than most viewers ever suspected. Producer Bob Fraser later revealed that the show's ultimate long-term goal was to chronicle Benson's rise all the way to the White House as the first African-American president of the United States. The plan involved a multi-season arc that would move Benson from lieutenant governor to governor, then from governor to U.S. senator, and eventually to a full presidential campaign. If the show had run long enough to execute this vision, it would have depicted a black president more than 20 years before Barack Obama made history in 2008. During the mid-1980s, that concept was not just bold, it was genuinely controversial. Fraser suggested that this long-term presidential storyline may have actually contributed to ABC's decision to cancel the show, as network executives may have been uncomfortable with where the narrative was heading. What could have been a landmark moment in television history was quietly buried when the plug was pulled. Quick reminder to subscribe if you are enjoying these revelations. And tell me in the comments, do you know any strange fact about this movie that I didn't mention? Let's build the list together. Number 14, a child's life was saved by the show. Television doesn't usually save lives, but a Benson episode managed to do exactly that. The show featured a scene where Benson uses the Heimlich maneuver to rescue Gretchen Krauss after she begins choking during a meal at the governor's mansion. It was written to demonstrate Benson's quick thinking and his genuine care for his colleagues, even the ones he bickered with constantly. The scene played out clearly enough that the technique was actually understandable to viewers watching at home. Years later, a young child who had watched that episode found themselves in a real emergency. A friend had begun choking. Drawing on the memory of what they'd seen Benson do on television, the child was able to apply the Heimlich maneuver correctly and dislodge what was blocking their friend's airway. What started as a character moment in a sitcom became an unexpected piece of public health education. The incident demonstrated something important. Children absorb information from television far more deeply than adults tend to assume. And when that information is presented in a memorable, dramatic context, it can stay with them long enough to matter. Number 15. The cliffhanger was network sabotage. The infamous cliffhanger ending wasn't accidental, and it wasn't creative ambition, it was a betrayal. Producer Bob Fraser revealed years after the fact that ABC network executives had already quietly decided to cancel Benson before the finale ever aired. Despite this, they specifically asked the production team to create a cliffhanger ending, claiming it would build anticipation for the next season. The writers, cast, and crew spent their energy setting up storylines they believed they'd get to pay off. They were wrong. ABC had no intention of ordering a season 8. According to Fraser, the cancellation was driven by the show's high production costs and internal network politics, with new executives pushing to replace established programming with cheaper alternatives. He described it as a last-minute decision that blindsided everyone involved, even though the network had clearly been planning it for some time. Fraser later disclosed that if the show had been renewed as promised, Governor Gatling would have won the election, and Benson would have been appointed as a U.S. Senator, the next step in that long-planned march toward the presidency that never came. Almost at the end, and the best is still coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. Bonus. The show almost didn't exist. Here's the fact almost nobody talks about. Benson nearly never happened. When Susan Harris first pitched the idea of giving Benson DuBois his own spin-off series after his breakout role on Soap, ABC was deeply skeptical. Network executives weren't convinced that a black lead character could carry a prime-time sitcom on his own, particularly one set in a political environment, which was considered a challenging genre for broad mainstream appeal. Harris fought hard for the concept, but the network's hesitation was significant enough that the show came closer to never being greenlit than most people realize. Robert Guillaume himself was uncertain whether the spin-off would work, reportedly expressing concern that stripping away Benson's sharper edges, the qualities that had made him so magnetic on Soap, would leave the character without enough bite to anchor his own show. What ultimately convinced ABC was the strength of Guillaume's existing fan base and the commercial potential of a series built around a character audiences already loved. But the margin was razor thin. Had the network held firm in its doubts, or had a different executive been in the room that day, one of the 1980s most beloved sitcoms and one of television's first major black-led primetime comedies simply would not have existed. And those were 15 Strange Facts About Benson, the political sitcom that hid more secrets than the governor's office it was parodying. This show was ahead of its time in ways it never got credit for, technologically, politically, and culturally. It told the story of a black man climbing the ladder of power at a time when that story was considered too ambitious even for fiction. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which fact surprised you the most. And don't forget to suggest another show that deserves its own list of strange facts. See you in the next video.